All right, today's lesson is going to be dividing with two-digit divisors, but today you have a special treat. There's a new voice in the lesson. See if you can name that voice.
Today our learning goal is I can accurately divide two-digit divisors, and I can use multiplication to check my answer to the division problem.
You guys are pros at this. We've already done the steps of division. Remember, does McDonald's sell burgers? DMSB. Divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. Since you see the pencil symbol, go ahead and pause the video and write these into your notes one more time.
Okay, let's go ahead and unlock the problem. Mr. Yates owns a smoothie shop. To mix a batch of famous orange punch smoothies, he uses 18 ounces of freshly squeezed orange juice. Each day, he squeezes 560 ounces of fresh squeezed orange juice. How many batches of orange punch smoothies can Mr. Yates make in a day? Well, I'm going to circle some important information here. And that's 18 ounces of freshly squeezed orange juice and 506 ounces of fresh made orange juice. I'm going to circle each day because that's kind of important to know. I'm going to underline how many batches of orange punch smoothies can Mr. Yates make in a day, because that's my question. And that question lets me know I have to divide. Well, I'm going to estimate first, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at the 18, and I'm going to go ahead and round that up or down. I have to see. So what am I going to round 18 to? Is it closer to 20 or 10? Well, it's closer to 20, so I'm going to write a 20, and then I'm going to do a division sign. It looks like I'm writing backwards, but that's okay. I'm going to say, what is a compatible number for 20 from 5 to 560? I'm going to round 560 up to 600. And then I can go ahead, and I like this, looking at it here. I have 1 0 in my divisor. I can cancel that with 1 0 in my dividend. And what is 60 divided by 2? That is 30. So 600 divided by 20 is 30, so my answer should be right around 30. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Here we go. We have to learn, step number 1, use the estimate to place the first digit of the quotient. The first digit of the quotient will be in the tens place. Step 2, divide the tens. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to divide. I'm going to write 18 for my divisor and 560 for my dividend, and I'm hoping to get a quotient that is correct. Here we go. 18, can I do 18 into 5? No. So I'm going to write a little X here. Then I'm going to say 18 into 56. How many times does 18 go into 56? And I am going to go ahead and I am going to put 2. And let's see how that works. We may have to adjust our quotient. So 2 times 8 is 16. Carry the 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus the 1 is 3. And I subtract, I get 20. Uh-oh. 20 is too big for me to subtract. So I'm going to have to adjust my quotient. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase. And remember in class, some teachers taught you're going to use your eraser a lot when you divide. That's okay. So I'm going to adjust it 1 higher to 3. Let's try it now. 8 times 3 is 24. I'm going to write a little 2 here. 3 times 1 is 3, plus the little 2 is 5. And I crossed it out because I already added it. Now I can subtract. 6 minus 4 is 2, and I can bring down my 0. Now I have to look. 18 into 20, that's going to go 1 time. That's easy. I'm going to multiply. Now I have to subtract and borrow, and my remainder is 2. So I divided. I got an answer of 31, remainder 2. And the question here is my estimate reasonable? Yes, it is. How can you tell if your estimate is reasonable? Because 31 remainder 2 is very close to 30. So this problem is correct. Okay, there we go. Okay, here's another example. 805 divided by 24. I already did this one. I looked at my divisor, 24, and I rounded it down to 20. And then I said I need to look for a compatible number for 20. Well, I have to round 805 down to 800. So I looked and I said 800 divided by 20. Well, my zeros cancel for my divisor and my dividend. And I look now, 80 divided by 2 is 40. So my estimate is 40. So my answer should be somewhat close to 40, which my answer to division is my quotient. So now I'm going to divide. And look at all this work I had to do, and I even checked it. So here I go. I did 805 divided by 24. So I said, how many times does 24 go into 8? It can't do that, so I just put a little X there, a little mark, just because I can keep them my places nice and straight. Then I go, how many times does 24 go into 80? Well, I said that's 3. And I multiplied 3 times 4, and I got 2, and then I got 12. I wrote down the 2, and I carried the 1, and then 3 times 2 is 6, and I added the 1 and got 7. So 3 times 24 is 72. And then I said 80 minus 72 is 8, and I said 8 is less than 24, the divisor, so I can bring down my 5. 24 into 85 is about 3. So I wrote a 3 for my quotient in the ones place, and I multiplied 24 times 3, and I got 72 again. So 85 minus 72 is 13. I have a remainder. So now I have to check my work. Now, a lot of you may not like to check your work. As a kid, it wasn't my favorite thing, but it made sure I got all the work right, so I definitely wanted to get the answer right. So what I did is I multiplied my quotient, 33, times my divisor, 24. Okay, you can do that as I speak. Sorry, that took me a minute. Mrs. LeBach had to interrupt me to show me something, so she's going to now have some fun with a red dot. So we are going to multiply our quotient, 33, Mrs. LeBach, there we go, times our divisor, 24. Oops. There we go. And we came out with a product of 729.
92.
Well, 92. Thank you, Mrs. LeBach. So 792, that's not 805, my dividend. Oh, I have to add in my remainder. So I added in 13. When I added 792 plus 13, I got my dividend, 805. And that makes me a very happy person.
Even though you see the pencil on this slide, we're going to give you a break. You don't have to copy this one because you paid so closely attention as Mrs. Lambert explained.
And I'm sure you're laughing at both of us right now.
All right, time for another example. I know you're seeing the pencil and you know you're going to have to copy it, but take the time to watch every step. You're going to have to do this on your own soon. First, we're estimating. Start with that divisor. 35 is going to become 40, and 3,927, using those compatible numbers, is going to become 4,000. Now, let's use basic facts. 4 divided by 4 is 1. This 0 and this 0 cancel. If we bring the other two zeros into the product, our estimate is 100. Okay, based on my estimate, I can see that my quotient is going to start in the hundreds place. So if I look, 35 divides into 39 one time. 1 times 35 is 35. Subtract, I get 4. You know what? I'm going to take a time out for a second and write my steps at the top of the page. Does McDonald's sell burgers? Just so I don't forget. All right, I subtracted. Next, I'm bringing down. All right, 35 divides into 42 one time. 1 times 35 is 35. I need to subtract. I can't take 5 away from 2, so I need to borrow. 12 minus 5 is 7. Bring down my 7. Now, 35 divides into 77 twice. 2 times 35 is 70. Subtract, I get 7. Because there's nothing else to bring down, 7's going to be my remainder. Now, remember I told you the beautiful thing about division is you can always check and see if you have the right answer. So let's check. Take the whole number of the quotient, that's 112. Multiply it by the divisor, that's 35. All right, when I multiplied that out, I got 3,920. But remember, I still have to add in my remainder, which is 7. 3,927. When I checked, it matches my original dividend. Good to go. All right, now we're going to make some connections with problem solving. So we have a bakery packages 1,650 cookies into 55 boxes. The same number of cookies is packed into each box. So we want to figure out how many cookies are in each box. Mrs. Lambert's going to mark up the problem to circle and underline important information. We need to know how many cookies we have in total, 1,650. We need to know how many boxes we have. There's 55. And I'm solving to find out how many cookies are in each box. So I'm splitting up the total into individual boxes. That tells me I'm going to be dividing.
Now we have to divide the cookies into the boxes. I'm sure you're getting very hungry. So let's go ahead and write I like to call it my den. So we have 1,650 divided by 55, just like that. And now we have to place the first digit in the quotient. So can I do 55 into 1?
Oh, no, you can't, Mrs. Lambert.
So I'm going to put a little mark there. Now, can we do 55 into 16, Mrs. LeBach?
Sure can't. Nope, too small.
Well, I like to keep my columns nice in a neat row. Let's go now over. Can I divide 55 into 165?
Absolutely.
Tens? Okay, so how many tens are in 55 into 165 tens?
I'm going to go with 3 tens.
Let's try. So 3 tens times 55, so 3 times the 5 is 15. Carry the 1. 3 times 15 is 1. Carry the 1 is 16. Well, I have a space, Mrs. LeBach, in the ones column of my quotient. What should I do with that? Well, I have to subtract. 165 minus 165 is 0. And then I bring down my next 0 in my ones. Okay, so now I say 55 into 0. Mrs. LeBach, how many times does 55 go into 0? I have a space here. I have to fill this in with a number. What would I fill it in with?
Well, 55 can't go into 0, so I'm thinking it goes in 0 times.
Yep, and we have to have that placeholder of 30. So now, 0 times 55.
That's 0.
And we get a 0 again. So how many cookies are in each box?
There's 30 cookies in each box, but we better check to be sure.
So,
checking the answer, I need to take the quotient, in this case it's 30, and multiply it by the divisor, which is 55. Now to make my life easier, I know the commutative property of multiplication tells me it doesn't matter which order I do this in. So I'm going to rewrite it as 55 times 3 and just add the 0 of my 30 in at the end. That just makes more sense to me. 5 times 3 is 15. Carry the 1. 5 times 3 is 15. Plus 1 is 16. And I'm going to bring that 0 back over. I like to work smarter, not harder. 1,650 matches my original dividend. Good job, Mrs. Lambert.
good job, Mrs. LeBach. Now, you may think that checking a math problem is a lot of work, but you see Mrs. LeBach and I checked 2 math problems and we got both of them right, and that's the goal.
All right, here's another example. Mrs. Perugini has 143 pieces of candy. If she has 13 students and the candy is divided evenly, we want to know how many pieces of candy each student will get. Got to underline that key information. In total, there's 143 pieces of candy. Lucky for these 13 students that it gets split up among them. And we want to know how many each student will get. Let's start the division. I have 143 divided by 13. I know that 13 can't divide into 1, so my quotient's going to have to start here in the tens place. 13 divides into 14 one time. 1 times 13 is 13. Subtract 1. 1 is less than 13, so I can bring down my 3. Oh, I'm lucky on this problem. I have to divide again. 13 goes into 13 one time. 1 times 13 is 13. Subtract, I get 0. Each kid is getting 11 pieces of candy. They must have done something really well.
And now we're going to check the problem. So I am going to, as Mrs. LeBach said, we're going to work, first we can do the quotient times the divisor. We can do it that way, or if you wanted to use the commutative property, you can write 13 times 11. Either answer, you hopefully get 143 because there's no remainder. So I'm going to do 13 times 11 because that's the one that makes me happy. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 110 is 1. And I've multiplied every number on the top times the 1 on the bottom factor. So now I'm going to put a 0 here as a placeholder. So now 110 times 3 is 3 tens, and 110 times 110 is 100. And I'm going to have to come over here because I don't want to write on the little boy who is counting candy in a jar. So 3 plus 0 is 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. And 1 plus 0 is 1. My answer I got is 143. This answer matches my quotient, my dividend, so my quotient is correct, and I am very happy.
All right, let's go ahead and compare both methods. We're going to compare the standard algorithm to partial quotients. So let's start with the algorithm. 620 divided by 28. 28 can't divide into 6, but it can divide into 62. 2 times. 2 times 28 is 56. Subtract. 12 minus 6 is 6. 5 minus 5 is 0. Bring down the 0. 28 goes into 60 2 more times. 2 times 28 is still 56. Subtract, and I get 4. There's nothing else to bring down, so my quotient is 22, remainder 4. Let's compare that to the partial quotients method. I still have 620 divided by 28, but now I'm going to take pieces of that dividend to subtract out as I go through. Let's start with 28 times 20. Remember, when you use partial quotients, you want to find a nice round number to multiply by, a 10 or a 20. I could have done a 10 here instead of a 20 and gotten to 80, but I knew I could get a little closer to my original dividend. So I'm going to go ahead and do 28 times 20, which is going to give me 560. I'm going to subtract that. 0 minus 0 is 0. Can't do 2 minus 6, so I'm going to borrow. 12 minus 6 is 6. Now I'm going to do 28 times 2 because that equals 56. I can subtract that. Got to borrow again. 10 minus 6 is 4. To get my quotient using partial quotients, I need to add what I multiplied by. So 20 plus 2 is 22, and write in my remainder. Remainder 4. There's 2 different methods to finding a quotient. Which one do you like better? All right, I know you've had fun, but we're finally at the end. It's time to summarize with the line of learning. Based on the last problem, explain which method, using the algorithm or partial quotients, you liked better, and explain why. Make sure you use math vocabulary and complete sentences in your response. Have a good night.